But it was later that year, in 1783, in December, that Washington made his most theatrical gesture, his most moral mark, and the results were monumental. The greatest act of his life, the one that made him famous, was his resignation as Commander-in-Chief of the American forces. This act was what he called his legacy to his countrymen, and no American leader has ever left a more important legacy. Now, following the signing of the peace treaty and British recognition of American independence, Washington stunned the world when he surrendered his sword to Congress on December 23, 1783, and retired to his farm at Mount Vernon. This was a highly symbolic act, a very self-conscious and unconditional withdrawal from the world of politics. In order to enhance the disinterestedness of his plea for greater union that he made, he sent a circular letter to all the states in which he promised not to take any share in public business hereafter. He now even resigned from his local vestry in order to make his separation from the political world complete. Now, his retirement from power had a profound effect everywhere in the Western world. It was extraordinary. It was unprecedented in modern times. A victorious general surrendering his arms and returning to his farm. Cromwell, William of Orange, Marlborough, all had sought political rewards commensurate with their military achievements. Though it was widely thought that Washington could have become, as I say, a king, he wanted nothing of the kind. He was sincere in his desire for all of his soldiers, all of his fellow soldiers, to return to our private stations in the bosom of a free, peaceful, and happy country. And everyone recognized his sincerity. It filled them with awe. Washington's retirement, said the painter John Trumbull, writing from London in 1784, excites the astonishment and the admiration of this part of the world. 'Tis a conduct so novel, so inconceivable to people who, far from giving up power they possess, are willing to convulse the empire to acquire more. King George III supposedly predicted that if Washington actually retired from public life and returned to his farm, he will be the greatest man in the world. Now, Washington wasn't naive. He was well aware of the effect his resignation would have. He was trying to live up to the age's image of a classical, disinterested patriot who devotes his life to his country, and he knew at once that he had acquired instant fame as a modern Cincinnatus. His reputation in the 1780s as a great classical hero was international, and it was unrivaled. He was a living embodiment of all that classical Republican virtue that the age was eagerly striving to recover. Thus, it was Washington's character, his moral character, his reputation for virtue that made him a great man. He was, as the French writer Chateaubriand said, a hero of an unprecedented kind. There had never been a great man quite like Washington before, and of course, as Napoleon emerged in 1800 as a Caesar-like world-shattering hero, it seemed there might never be another like Washington again. Now, once Washington had earned his reputation as a moral hero, he did not want to lose it. As the example of the canal shares reveals, he spent the rest of his life guarding and protecting his reputation, his character, and worrying about it. He was very sensitive to any criticism. He judged all his actions by what people might think of him. In that very suspicious age where people were acutely jealous of what great men were up to, Washington thought it important that people understand his motives. The reality was not enough. He had to appear virtuous. He was obsessed that he not seem in any way base, mean, avaricious, or unduly ambitious. No one, said Jefferson, worked harder than Washington in keeping motives of interest or blood or friendship or hatred from influencing his behavior. His concern for his reputation was not unusual for the age. As many of you know, all 18th century gentlemen tried scrupulously to guard their reputations, which is what they meant by their honor. Honor was the esteem in which they were held, and they prized it. To have honor across space and time was to have fame. And fame, the ruling passion of the noblest minds, as Hamilton called it, was what the Founding Fathers were after. Washington above all. And he got it sooner and in greater degree than any one of his contemporaries. And naturally, having achieved what all his fellow revolutionaries still anxiously sought, he was reluctant to risk it.